Well, hi, everybody, and welcome to our Paying It Forward, Paying It Back series. Glad to be joined by our pal, Jerry Izenberg, one of the NSMA Hall of Famers, legendary. Started at the Star Ledger in Newark when you were, what, 12, Jerry? Is that it?
Actually, it was a year earlier, but
You were 11. But you looked old for your age.
well, I do.
I want to thank our friends at Greater Winston-Salem Inc., who helped us put on this series. And with that, we'll get to our hour with Jerry Izenberg. Jerry, you're in the news now because you had your first novel published at age 89, I guess last November came out, or October.
Yeah.
And now the re-release in paperback of Once There Were Giants. You're 90 years old. You like to work, obviously.
Well, if I don't, I'll look in the mirror and it's over. But if I keep working and keep moving, I had that policy with my paper when I would have to go in back in New Jersey. I'd always wear a trench coat, and I'd say, "Oh, who's that?" And I'd be out again, and nobody ever bothered me.
Well, let's go back to the start of your career. How did you get into this business and why?
Well, I got into this thing because of a big fire.
Mhm.
When I came out of high school, my father said, "What are you going to do?" And I said, "I'm going to go in the Army." And this was like 5 months before the Korean War started. I'm going to go in the Army, and I'll get my GI Bill. And he said, "No, you're going to college." I said, "No, I don't want to go to college." He said, "You're going to college." And in 1948, in Newark, New Jersey, if your father said you're going to college, you're going to college. Of course, he didn't give me 83 cents for it, nothing. So instead, I got a job 40 hours a week at night in a chemical plant. And I hated it. The guy had a contract to supply red dye to some outfit in India. And he was a genius who, in those days, the big thing was instant coffee and instant soup. And he figured if you can put the water back in, I could take the water out. I can ship it at half the price to India. It's powder now. So I loaded and unloaded barrels of Congo red dye for 2.5 years. I come home at night, my eyebrows would be red. I'd cough, it would come up red. My hair was red. And just when I thought that was going to be my lot in life, the chemical plant blew up. During that period, I had 8 o'clock class, first class, noon homework, 4 o'clock chemical plant, 12:30, quarter one, go to sleep, 8 o'clock first class. It just went on for. I would meet myself coming in. I was so happy when it blew up. I saw a sign in a window, short order cook needed. I couldn't boil eggs. So I go in there and I tell the guy, "Oh, I'm your man. I could do. I'm a college boy and a blah blah blah." He said, "Oh, I'm living at home." He said, "Okay, I'll hire you." After 2 weeks, he said, "Listen, here's $12. I want you to go away and never come back because you've broken every health rule the board of health has in this state, and I can't afford to be closed." So somebody tells me they're hiring copy boys at the Star Ledger for $6 a night. Well, that ain't going to get me through college, but I did have the first semester saved up for the following year. So I go down there, I get in. Now you have to understand, in those days, the Star Ledger was the poster boy for illiteracy. Every drunk in New York wound up his career at the Star Ledger. I walk in and there's a guy from the Daily Racing Form named Jim Sinnott, also has had a little trouble with the bottle, and he is sitting at a typewriter with his hands on the keys, staring ahead. I'm saying, what concentration, my God. So I go in, I get interviewed, I'm coming out. I got to say hello to this guy because I tap him on the shoulder and he immediately falls headfirst on the floor. That was my introduction to the paper. After 3 weeks, I started getting coffee and crap like that. After 2 weeks, I was editing copy. After 3 weeks, I was writing. So you can see we were really, in terms of literacy, we were poverty level. And of my 70 years in the business now, 2.5 of them were spent at the Herald Tribune. That was much later. Best paper I ever worked with. It was unbelievable. And 2.5 were spent with the United States Army on an expense-paid trip to Korea. And the rest of it is all at the Star Ledger. So about 66 years I've been at the Star Ledger. I'm in a rut. That's how
you might not get out.
No, I don't think so. That's how I started. And, the 2 years, I like to say this because we're talking among newspaper people. And we're about to become, about the level of Neanderthals if it keeps going the way it's going. But I worked for Stanley Woodward in 2 papers. He came to the Star Ledger after I got out. And then he took me with him to the Tribune. I never worked for a man who taught me more about ethics. And this is a guy who I get my first spring training. He liked me. I was a kid. I was eager to go. I'm back from Korea. Let me go. They send me, the Giants have moved. They send me to Phoenix to do the Giants spring training. I get out there and I immediately fall in love with my pros. I love my pros. 3 days out, I get a phone call. And he never identified himself. He had a distinctive voice. And he said, I want you in my office in 2 days. I said, but Stanley, I'm not through. He said, you're going to be through if you're not in my office in 2 days. I said, what the hell did I do? I get back to Newark. I go in, and Stanley never had an office. It was a joke. He had a cubicle. He always wanted to be with us, And he looked at me and he said, sit down. Who's going to play second base for the Giants? So, I'm going to be the font of information. Well, that's an interesting question. There's 7 guys, right? He said, I didn't ask you who's trying to be. Who is going to be the 7th? He said, let me tell you something, young man. I don't give a shit about the fact that you're 12 miles up the road from the Lost Dutchman's mine. I don't care about the painted desert at sunset. I want to know who's going to play second base. And you're going to find out by sitting in that chair at the desk till I tell you to get off the desk. And every day you'll give me bulletins. You ain't going back. It was the second greatest lesson I ever got in the humility of the newspaper business. And when he sent me out, I'll never forget this. Finally, he decides I'm ready. He sends me out with a schedule. It says, Jerry Izenberg, it used to say desk constantly. I didn't even have to look at it. Now it says college basketball, college basketball, college basketball. I said, gee, I made it. So he says, you like a new job? I said, well, I got one question. You don't like the job? I got guys who can, no. I got one question. You don't say which colleges. What is it you want me to do? He said, I have a habit of hiring people because I think they can do the job. If they can't, you know what I do? I get somebody who can do the job. Now, do you want the job or do you not want it? And besides, before you take the job, you should know this. I have a very low opinion of grown men wearing short pants who play a game where nobody can hit you. And boy, I'll tell you something, I kept looking over my shoulder for as long as I worked for greatest experience of my life. Unbelievable man.
So that was your second greatest.
That was my second
humility.
paper.
What's number 1? No, humility. You said
I was at the Ledger first.
Right.
I was the Ledger 3 times before I came back the last time. I was the Ledger first. Stanley came in. He took me with him to New York. I went back again and became a columnist. But it was fascinating to me because he was such a stickler. He'd send you telegrams on the road. Great lead. That'll teach the Times a lesson, okay? Or he'd say, what are you thinking about? That's all it would say, and I'd say, I'm in trouble again. And he was on I'll tell you, there's a story connected to our association. I guess I'm the last man standing, so I get into the Hall of Fame. I think I came through a side door, but I'm in there, right? All right? So now I'm in the Hall of Fame, and I get a phone call 3 days before I leave for Salisbury. And it's Ellen Woodward, his daughter, who I never met, but we talked all the time on the phone. And she said, Jerry, I am so happy that you're going to be on the same wall that Papa's on. And it means a lot to me. And I got to tell you something. When he was dying, and I was the only one who used to go to Connecticut to visit him, he was dying of cancer, terrible pain. And she said, I used to sit on the bed and talk to him about the 2 things my mother was gone, so she was not there. So the two things left for him to care about were newspapers and college football. And he never called newspapers journalism things. Never, never. When I went to interview for the first job, he said, it was a good interview. I was working for a place called the Patterson News for a cup of coffee or something. And he said to me, I'd like to know one thing, young man. Why do you want to go in? Why do you want to be come back from Korea? Why do you want to be in this business? Okay, now come the brownie points, right? Oh, Stanley, all my life I wanted to be a journalist. He looks at me like he's scraping dog shit off the bottom of his shoe. And he says, you're in the wrong building, son. We don't have any journalists here. All we have here are newspaper men. And if I hire you, you damn well better not forget that. He would come to work in the New York Tribune. He was the strongest man I ever knew. Unbelievable. I saw him pull up. Well, we had a bar on the first floor of the newspaper. I mean, that's nirvana, really, right? And every time he wanted me to do something that I didn't want, he knew I didn't want to do, he'd say, let's go get a drink. And he'd reach across the bar, take out a bottle of wild turkey, and he'd get 2 water glasses, and he'd fill them with wild turkey. And he'd say, you drink that down, and then we'll talk. After a while, I'd say, Stanley, just tell me what you want me to do. I can't handle this stuff anymore. But he was a stickler for that. So one day, how I got to be a columnist was he said, I want you to take the job in Jersey. I said, how do you know about that? He said, that's none of your business. I want you to take that job. I said, well, I don't want to take it. Look, I'm only 31 years old. I love what I'm doing. My wife and I got to get divorced, so I don't really care what happens to her. I just want to stay here and work for you. He said, you can't. And if you don't take the Jersey job, you're fired. And I said, you can't fire me. He said, you're fired. And I said, you wouldn't do it. He said, Jerry, listen to me carefully. I'm going to be fired next week. And I want you to be a columnist before I leave this business. And he writes me a note in which he says, the first book he did was really a brilliant book. The second book, he was in pain. It wasn't very good. But he dedicates it to Jerry Izenberg, the logical successor to Rice, McGeehan, Lardner, and Red Smith. And she told me that. She said it, put it in a letter for me. And at my induction, I mentioned the letter because I was really so proud of it. And it was, he meant a lot to me. And he taught me a couple of things. He taught me when to write. He taught me when not to write. And that's something a lot of us never learn. And that's a matter of common sense. It's not a matter of covering up for anybody. It's not a matter of burying something under the rug. It's a matter of, do people need to know it or don't they need to know it? And that was Stanley. Well, it was the greatest education a guy could have. The job sent me to 26 countries.
Wow. How many, did you ever count up or list how many different sports you covered in that time?
I can't. I once covered a fly fishing derby at Broader Market Street in Newark, New Jersey. We haven't had a fish go by there. When my father was trying to help a friend of his in politics, and he got the guy elected, he gets a phone call, he gets a check for $5. This is before I'm born. So you imagine that far. And it's from City Hall. And it's a sidewalk inspector. So he calls up City Hall. Well, they never heard anybody wanting to give money back. So the call is bouncing all around the building. And finally, some guy says, listen, this is absurd. Go to the window and look out and come back. My father does. He says, is the sidewalk there? Yeah, so you're doing a hell of a job. And if you get him elected again, we'll put you on Shark Patrol at Broader Market Street. But I covered Irish hurling.
Wow.
And in the Polo Grounds with Christy Ring was the guy's name. He was the Babe Ruth of Irish hurling. I never seen anything like it. So I had to learn it. I had to go up to the Bronx, go to the little park up there where the sons of the immigrants played. And I remember I spoke to the guy named Byrne, who was the editor of the Irish Echo. I figured if he doesn't know, who knows? And he said, he said, this is our sport. He said, in 1820 something or other, the British didn't want us with the hurley sticks because we would drill with them for military action. So they banned them. And now it's 1958 and we're still using the damn things. So that's how much we thought of them. He says, go see a guy who has a bar on 8th Avenue, 3 blocks from the Garden. He's the president of the American Gaelic Athletic Association. So I go, and I said to him, I don't know much about this sport. He said, but I know this. I see you guys bringing ringers on the weekend from Ireland to play for your counties here. He said, well, that's because, you know, every kid in the Bronx now doesn't want to play hurling anymore, the grand old game. They want to play quarterback for Power Memorial Catholic High School. We can't get those kids. So he said, and I'll tell you something, I don't know what the attraction is. He said, I go up to Yankee Stadium and Mickey Mantle goes out there and there's a high ball and he's reaching up. He catches the ball and everybody goes, Ray Mickey, and nobody lays a fucking finger on him. What kind of a sport is that? So as offbeat as you want to get, I've covered them all. I had an argument with a guy once, a fight manager, who was a union guy. And he says, I don't like Sports Illustrated. He said, it's too fucking tally-ho. I said, well, what do you mean? Well, it covers yachting. What? With the boats. And it covers lacrosse. I said, well, do you know what lacrosse is? He said, no, but why would you come? It's 22 men with sticks in their hands. And he says, hey, we have that down at the Union every Thursday. So I got a good education from the streets.
Love it. Was boxing your favorite sport to cover?
One reason. Well, it was, I'd have to say it was yes, probably. I have to give a yes, because of a simple reason. Bats, balls, boxing gloves don't play sports. People do. All right, you got 3 guys in a ring. One is not supposed to hit anybody. So now you got 2 guys in the ring, right? You got a cut man and you got a trainer in each corner. That's 5 people you have to keep track of. If you can't get a column out of that, you ain't even trying.
And you didn't even need a roster for that.
Yeah, no, you don't need anything. You don't need. I remember there's a guy, I'm not going to mention him because maybe it was a bad day. Maybe he had acid indigestion that morning. But there was a guy who played in this town, a great Hall of Famer. And I was going to do him at the end. He'd been traded and he was traded back here. And I called him up. He was at the hotel. And I said, listen, I don't want to go to ball game tonight. It's July. I'll come to your hotel. You'll tell how it feels to be back. We'll do the column. And the guy said to me, no, come to the ballpark. So I go to the ballpark. He's sitting in the locker room and he sees me. He gets up and he walks out and he says, I got to take batting practice. So he's at batting practice. He takes 4 swings. He's a right-handed hitter. Now, as anybody who's ever been to a ball game knows, they take batting practice on the left side of the cage. He finishes, jumps out. He goes to the right side of the cage. I run behind the cage like a jerk to talk to him. He jumps in and he swings and he gets out on the left side. And I said to myself, I'm making a deal with myself forever. Here it is. I'm chasing a guy with an IQ that is 4 points lower than a rutabaga. And why? There's 25 guys on this team. Somebody else will do something, even if whether he drops the ball or hits the ball. I ain't going to do that ever again. And if I don't get a decent reception, I gave up. But I got a reception I never expected from Mike Tyson. Just seems to flow into it, right? Mm-hmm. We could take this act on the road, maybe. Anyway, Tyson, I knew him since he was 12. Cuss introduced him to me, whatever. So now he's going to fight Michael Spinks, which really was the picture textbook of Exhibit 1 about how good this guy could be at any given night. So I call on Thursday and I get the trainer, Rooney, who's had a few drinks. And I said, I'm going down Thursday. Tell Mike I'll see him Thursday. He said, don't bother. Mike don't want to talk to you. I don't want to talk to you. What do you mean? The press is very unfair to Michael. I said, let's understand something. The press does not have 1 freaking head and 2 freaking legs and 2 freaking arms. If you want to say I'm unfair to him, okay. Don't lump me with anybody else, please. So, and by the way, if you don't want to deliver the message, go fuck yourself. And I hang up. The phone rings in about 4 minutes. Michael says, come down and he'll talk to you. Well, I know he would. All right, so I go down, and the greatest gift in my life is I'm sitting between our brand new boxing writer, Chris Thorne, who knows nobody at that point, and Bill Gilday, a wonderful writer from the Washington Post, and he's doing boxing. And they both say to me, we don't know this guy. Could we come upstairs with you for the interview? And I said to Chris, you better come because this guy's going to be around a little while. And I said, Bill, you're perfectly welcome. You can interview him first. I really don't care. We get up there and they're looking at me. They're looking at him. They're all afraid of him, you know. So I say, hey, I got to give him a softball and then let's go to work. The softball is very simple. Mike, where do you run in the morning? I figured he'll answer that easily. And he says, well, I went on a boardwalk. I said, really? Oh, yeah. People see me. They wave. Good luck, Mike. And I said, well, that's pretty interesting. Yeah, right. So tell me this. What do you think about when you run? Are you thinking about this fight? No, I don't think about this fight. This fight is easy. I think about Cuss yelling at me. All right, Cuss is dead now. Now, Cuss D'Amato had a voice, the equivalency of the old Offenhauser engines you used to hear whine at the Indy 500, right? Mm-hmm. And when and he was also half insane. So it was an interesting combination. So I imitate Cuss. I know him since I'm 12, since he's 12. I don't know. And he laughs. And then he says, I don't know where it went wrong. And then he says to me, why did Cuss have to die on me? Why did Jimmy Jacobs, the co-manager, why did he have to die on me? It's no fun. It's all about the money, the money, the money. He leans forward and puts his head on my chest and starts to cry. I mean, huge tears. I got kids older than him, so I put my arms around him and said, just take it easy a minute, right? He walks back, looks out the window, comes back, and we finish the interview. My shirt is so wet, I have to go upstairs in Trump Plaza and change my shirt. That's how bad it was, how much he cried. And the next day, I remember my lead was the heavyweight champion of the world cried yesterday. Now, the thing about that is, if I had not had Chris Thorne with me and Bill Gilday, I never would have read it. Who the hell is going to believe it? It's an unbelievable story. But what interested me so much is I thought he would forget about it or try to hide it or whatever, because I wrote it. Mm-hmm. When he came out with The Undisputable Truth, his book, the anecdote is in there. So, I mean, I don't know what that's apropos of, but that's the story.
But I guess that's what makes, I mean, they were just great characters in that sport.
Well, there are, you know, and it used to be, you know, New York City used to be really, it's like, you remember when Burt Lancaster in Atlantic City says, you should have seen the Atlantic Ocean then. It was really something, right? Well, that's what I say about New York. I didn't live there. I lived right across the river, but I worked there for so many years and so many days. Madison Square Garden was like a giant magnet. Tuesday and Thursday night, before the scandal, college basketball. Friday night, the Friday night fights. Sunday, the Rangers and hockey. The only days that were, now you have to understand what happened in those nights. People came out of the subway on 50th and 8th like ants. It was like we were looking down. They were all over the street. They walked, cars couldn't go. They were walking the street to the garden, or they were walking to the restaurants nearby. It was like Mardi Gras. It was like Mardi Gras with a Brooklyn accent, okay? Mm-hmm. And then what happens is the only night that's really open is Wednesday night. Wednesday night, Frankie Carbo, a gentleman who is known as the National Persuader for people interested in boxing, he set up his office in the Garden Cafeteria, which is catty corner on 8th Avenue. He'd sit at a little table with black coffee, and the managers would come in, hat in the hand. Listen, you got to give my fighter a fight. You got to get. So that was his office there. And I would see him do that. I mean, he was, you know, I remember we went to ringside and he pulled out a gun to protect us. There was a riot going on. Look, I'll say this about Carbo. 7 murders. Does not make him a guy I want on my Christmas list, right? If I had a Christmas list, which I don't. And he's one day he gets a phone call. I got to tell you this story. One day he gets a phone call from somebody in the Genovese family. Big, what the hell was his name? Big Jaime, Big somebody. It was a mobster. Is in the bridal suite at the Elizabeth in Elizabeth, New Jersey, at the Carteret Hotel. Big Greenie, that's his name was Greenbaum. Big Greenie. We want you to go there, knock on the door, and kill him. And anybody else who's in the room, kill them also. We don't need any witnesses. So he goes over, bang, bang, bang. He comes out. What's his next move? He goes to the Elizabeth. Now, I'm telling you this because the guy was so big in boxing. He goes to the Elizabeth, New Jersey police headquarters across the street. And he says to the desk sergeant, I had a little unfortunate trouble, you know. I had to kill a guy and well, it must have been self-defense, right? They were all on the pad. That's why he went there. They were all on the pad, the Elizabeth Police Department. So they said, look, we'll have to go in the cell, put you in the cell in the back, and we'll lock it up. And you have to stay there maybe a couple of weeks. We can quash this whole thing, which they thought they had done. Friend of mine, much older than I, who was connected, you know, he's a fight promoter. His name is Willie Gilzenberg. He's got a fight club in Newark called the Laurel Garden, which is nicknamed the Bucket of Blood, because you had a fight there. You don't go fight in the garden. You got to prove yourself there, right? So Gilly got no main event for February, and this is January. He goes to jail because Carbo had a middleweight named, I think it was a middleweight. He was a champion named Babe Risco. And he can't defend because Carbo won't sign to make a match. He's hiding in the can. Well, Gilzenberg knows the commissioner in New Jersey. Now, we didn't have the WBO. We didn't have all this alphabet soup. We had one commission, the National Boxing Association. And they were as corrupt as the others. But anyway, so Gilly calls and says, you know, that Risco, he's not defending his title. He calls Abe Green, a buddy of his, who's the head of the thing. He says, hey, but you ought to write him a letter and tell him you're going to take away his title. So they do that. Now, armed with this information, Gilzenberg goes to the Elizabeth jail. He says to the desk sergeant, I want to see Frankie Carbo. Nobody by that name here. Then endurance on him. I want to see Mr. Gray. That was the nom de boxing for him. Well, he's here, but he's very busy. I don't know if he can take the time. He's in jail. I don't know if he can take the time to speak to you. Let me find out. He says he never heard of you, but he'll give you 5 minutes if you go right now and don't waste his time. Gilzenberg tells me the story. He goes in the back. Frankie is sitting in the cell with Doby getting a manicure. And there's a table next to him. And we had a 5-star restaurant in Newark then, but it's hard to believe, but we did. Called the Tavern, great restaurant. And Longie's woman from Murder Incorporated had the controlling share in the restaurant. And Longie loved the cheesecake, so everybody had to like the Tavern. That was the name of it. Well, there's 4 male waiters with the leather aprons, you know, from the old days at Chop House. They're setting up his dinner table with the flowers in the middle and everything. And he's talking to them and they're doing his nails. So he says to Gilly, well, what do you want? You can see I'm busy. I haven't got much time for this shit. He said, listen, they're going to take Risco. You're going to take Risco's title? I'll cut your dick off and I'll do it. No. I'm not going to take it. The commission's going to take it. But I have a solution for you. Well, what's the solution? Have him fight a guy at my club. I got a guy, never mind boxing fighters. He can't box oranges. He won't lay a glove on your fighter. You'll save your title. You won't be bugged anymore. And I'll get his end of the purse. Plus, I'll get the gate because I'm promoting the fight. So the guy says, okay, you can do it. I got it. Well, not quite. You couldn't make this stuff up. You have to go to Brooklyn to a place called Pineapple Street, to the Italo-American Social Club. You go down there and everything's going to be fine. So he goes down there, asks for Joey A. That's Joe Adonis. Knocks on the door. Guy says, what are you doing here? There ain't no Jews in this club. It's an Italian church. Like, no. I'm going to see, you want to see, everybody wants to see Joey A. Mr. Gray sent me. If you're telling the truth, you could see him. If you're not, you won't walk out of this place. He goes in. Now Joey Adonis is in the back room. He says, all right, what do you want? He said, well, you see, they want to take the title. I don't care about titles. I don't care. If Mr. Gray sent you, that's good enough for me. You got the fight. I got the fight just like that. just like that, usual rules. Well, what are the usual rules? Well, if he wins, we own him. Well, when do I get him back? After he loses. And that fight took place, and it's in the ring record book, and it saved Risco's title.
Wow. Great stories. Muhammad Ali, your relationship with him?
50 years. We were friends for 50 years. First time I saw him was in 1960 Olympics, and he's got the medal on. Now, I didn't go see him fight. It was a light heavyweight championship. I mean, it was like you're fighting to become Apache rain dance chief today. I mean, it means nothing. But he's on the steps, I noticed, and he's loud. You got to hear him. And he's got the medal, and the athletes are walking by. I'm going to be the heavyweight champion. You see this medal? I'm the medal, and the face, and this and that. Half of them couldn't understand a word he was saying. They didn't speak English. But I noticed one thing. The female athletes would go like 10 steps past him, stop, turn back, and look at him. And that's when I said, there's something here to bear watching. That was the first time I met him.
How many of his fights did you attend?
4 fewer than Dave Anderson. They had more money than we do. We couldn't go to some. But I did go for the Holy Trilogy. Zaire, Malaysia, Manila. And Manila was the greatest fight at any weight I ever saw. And for heavyweight says a lot because, Ali could move, Joe could move, but Joe only moved in one direction, straight ahead. Mm-hmm. And I'll never forget that fight because, first of all, Eddie Futch was now the manager trainer. And Eddie brought in a great middleweight named George Benton, a real good puncher, a guy who, if he weren't black, he'd have been the middleweight champion several times over. And he said, your job is to teach Joe to throw a right hand. I used to kid Joe, if your right shoe comes untied, you're going down because you can't tie it. He was a one-armed fighter, which he was, a left hook, but what a left hook. Anyway, he teaches him to throw a right hand. Now we're in Manila, the fight starts, and Frazier's pretty close to being knocked out in the second or third round. Suddenly, he throws a right hand and he hits Ali. It didn't hurt him, but he hits him. Ali always spoke in the ring. Always. I can tell you stories about the things he's done. Always spoke. And he says, why do you write that? I never speak. I know. Well, he did. He didn't know where he was. He just was so involved in it. It was like Lombardi in the game he was winning. So.
Fix your headset there. It's falling.
So finally, after he hits him with the right hand, Ali yells at him, you ain't got no right hand. You can't throw a right hand. You're an old man. You can't do that. And he hits him with another right and says, go ask George Benton. So now the fight is like a financial graph. Ali's up, Ali's down. Ali's up, and it goes like that all through the fight. The greatest fight I ever saw without a single knockdown. And I'm going to tell you why there were no why there were no clinches. Maybe one or two, that's it. They each wanted a different referee, each camp, because they wanted their referee. The Filipino Boxing Commission said, no, we're going to have a Filipino referee. Well, they both took the same argument. No Filipino is big enough to tear these two guys apart the way they feel about each other. So in comes the head of the Filipino Boxing Commission. He's a colonel in the army, reaches in, takes a 45, puts it on the table and says, I understand there's an argument about who should referee this fight. I have decided, and he pats the 45 again, and he says, a Filipino will work this fight. Well, after he touched the 45 the second time, nobody had any objections. He said, you should meet him. He brings in a guy, and the guy's name is Sonny Padilla. He is the largest, the tallest, heaviest Filipino I ever saw since Roman Gabriel. And he could handle these guys very easy. And he did something I've never seen another referee do to Ali or Frazier. Ali had a habit, he put his hand behind your neck, pull your head down, uppercut. First time he did it, Padilla leans in, he says, next time it's a point. The time after that, you're out of the building. Then Joe hits him below the Mason and Dixon line. And he looks down, he intervenes, and he says, next time a point. Time after that, you're out of the building. So no clinches. And it went on and on and on. In the 10th round, I said to Jerry Lister, who was then the sports editor of the New York Post, which used to pick me up in syndication. I said, Jerry, they should stop this fight right now, 10th round. Tell them they both won and send them home. No one is going to lose this fight. And we got to the 12th or 13th round. I'm not sure which. Frazier now, his eyes swollen. So he's got to straighten up, which is why he loses the fight. He's standing there with his arms down and his legs are vibrating like rubber. And all Ali has to do is take 2 steps, push him. The fight is over. Ali could not take the 2 steps. That's how close this fight was. My scorecard had Ali by a point going into 15, which never happened. So if Frazier by some miracle would catch him and knock him out, he would win. If he knocks him down, he would win on my scorecard. And if he wins the round, they got a draw. And when Ali came up that aisle and he leaned in, I was sitting next to Dave Anderson, and he knew the 2 of us very well. He leaned in and he said, fellas, that's the closest thing you will see to death. And I remember saying to him, I don't want to see anything any closer because I'll be dead. It was an incredible, incredible fight. And to have been there in Manila, it was just, I mean, you don't see things like that. And both guys were great. They were good interviews, both guys. They really were. And to me, that maybe is worth a little more than the fight. I remember the night before Ali fought Holmes in that horrible thing. I was in his dressing room. Holmes, Ali jumps. He says, you don't think I can win? I said, Muhammad, I just came over here because this should be your last fight. I was wrong. He had one more. And I'm thinking, I want to tell you how much it meant to me to have you fill that freaking empty white space, which was looming before me every day. And you filled it so many times. That's the only reason I came. He said, well, look at this. He rips his shirt off. It's ghostly. He looks like he looked when he fought Sonny Liston the first time. What I did, and I told him, well, you could have done that in the health spot. What I didn't know was he was on diuretics. He could barely lift his arms, barely lift his arms. So it was, I mean, we shared a lot. We had a lot of fun. We had a lot of laughs. We had a lot of sadness. He used to say when they wanted to kill boxing in New York State. So Madison Square Garden is assembling all the writers. We're going on this particular training. Why don't you come join us? I go up there. I want to see it. I didn't really, Ali was getting ready to fight Doug Jones. So I really didn't know him that well. We get up there and the thing is a farce. The guy says, your fights are crooked. And he says to him, well, Senator, he's an assemblyman. Ali made him a senator immediately. Well, Senator, he said, it takes a cook to know a cook. So you could be right. All right. So now we got to spend the night in Albany till the train leaves at 1 a.m. So we each get rooms in a hotel. He's wandering around. He knocks on the door. He said, can I come in? I said, yeah, but I ain't talking to you. I'm writing a column. He said, well, I got to lay down. I'm sure. I said, take my bed. Go to sleep. I'll wake up when it's time to go, which he did. Then for years, he would put his arm around me and say, whoever happened to have the misfortune of saying there, this man gave me his bed. This man gave me his bed. So finally, one day I said to him, that's because I didn't know who you were.
Very good. Talking about boxing, they're re-releasing in paperback Once There Were Giants, which is your book. How many books have you written total?
16.
16.
One novel.
Which just came out last year. So
yeah, well, I was
89.
waiting. I was afraid I better not wait any longer.
You want to tell everybody what that's about? It's
Well,
fairly autobiographical. Would that be fair to
you
say?
mean the novel?
Yes.
Well, I'll say this. My wife is an Afro-American, and the hero in the book is an Italian-American college kid and an Afro-American college girl. And the whole book goes to the glue. Can they make it? You have to understand Newark. This is 5 months after the riot. A black girl and a white guy could not hold hands walking down the street in Newark. How far from the South, but could not right after the riot. That's how bad it was. So they're the glue that holds the book together. Then there's the mafia, which is going to fix a mayor election. And I knew the 3 guys I knew, Richie the Boot Biardo, um, Carlo Gambino, and Frank Costello. And they're very active in Newark. Both the Genovese and the Gambino families had headquarters in Newark, and they were funny. And I've been in those headquarters many times with them. The the um, the Gambinos had a fake Italian restaurant called the Y Kai, and the walls are covered. So help me, in maroon velour with fake artifacts pinned to the velour. I remember writing in the novel, the decorator outdid himself in early Gavone, and then the other place was called the Finish Line. One side was a candy store that nobody ever went into unless you were playing a number, and on the other side was a pizza. Now I pride myself on New Jersey pizza. I think it's among the best in the world. You can't get bad pizza, but you can next to the Finish Line because they didn't want anybody buying pizza. They wanted their place to blend in with the whole neighborhood. And I'll tell you, so they're in it. There's a sports columnist named Jerry Delicio. Now, it's not Jerry Izenberg because this guy won a Pulitzer and deserves it because I make him, so he deserves it, right? He's used because of his boxing contacts as the go-between between the two families. Because, in fact, in real life, Gambino once tried to kill the Boot, and the Boot once tried to kill Gambino, but they get together on this because it's business. You know, business. You don't let this stuff get in the way. And the whole book is moving toward this kid. This kid's a football player too, and at a Division III school in New Jersey. And the election after the riot, most of the minorities moved out of the city, or not all of them, but basically. So the Italians and the blacks are left to decide the fate of Newark. Each wants political control of the city, so the hatred becomes really violent. That's what the book is about for these two poor kids. Are they going to make it? Not going to make it. But I will say this. There's a scene. Their first date is similar to my first date with my wife, which came 7 years after the riot. So it wasn't that tough, but it wasn't great either. I took her to Little Italy to hear jazz, and he takes her to Chinatown for a reason that's explained in the book. Nobody is looking at them in Chinatown. What the hell do they care, white, black? They're all yellow. And that dawns on them while they're there. But we went home on the Staten Island ferry. And he went home with her on the Staten Island ferry. And I will tell you this, from experience and from the two kids in the book. If you think you might be falling in love, but you're not sure, do not try to take on an adversary like a full moon over the Hudson River at 1:00 in the morning. You cannot win. And that's what brings them together. And that's what brought Eileen and me together. So all of that is real. It's in the book. And I'm very proud of it because a friend of mine called me up the other day. There's a scene on Sunday, the Italian dinner, when they fight. See, they tell the black mother in chapter 9, we're in love, They don't tell the Italian father and mother till chapter 32. There's a lot of reasons not to tell them, and they're delineated in the book. And there's a scene where, look, what interested me is how people see, but they don't know what they're seeing. The Italian homes in Newark, I'm talking about the lower middle class, and the black homes in Newark were exactly the same. What was the most important room in both homes? The kitchen. The kitchen is where the kids got the lecture. The kitchen is where they talked about finances late at night. The kitchen is where the card games took place. The living room in the black homes and in the Italian homes is covered in see-through slip covers. In the Italian home, the priest gets to come to the living room. In the black home, the teacher gets to come to the living room. But they're so much alike. And in fact, when they really meet, they had gone to school together and never said a word to each other because there are only 40 blacks in Barringer High School. Everybody else was Italian. And when they finally meet, they meet the only place they met, but they didn't know each other. They meet after after their sophomore year in the Newark, Maine post office because the Italians control the job. So he's got a summer job. The postal service is trying to bring more blacks in. She's got and they wind up sorting mail next to each other. So she didn't look at him. She's throwing him. She's pissed off. She's not pissed off at him. She's pissed off at the whole situation that she lived through and she was a part of. So he says, Miss, I think I know you. I think she said, you don't know me. She didn't look at him. I don't, she said, I'm sure, uh, I'm sure I know you. And she gets off the stool, faces him in the pose that everybody listening to this has seen in a woman who's pissed off at him once in their life. Legs apart, hands on hips, and she says to him, you don't know me, you recognize me, and I don't want to recognize you. And don't say another word because the next words out of your mouth are going to be some of your best friends are black. Well, now he's really chastened. Meanwhile, a guy who's got a political job comes through, gets her in the dark corner, and he's groping her. He sees it, and he remembers what all the ethnic fathers in Newark told all their ethnic sons. If a girl's in trouble, it's your business. And if it's your sister, break his neck. He's off the stool. He hits the guy a left hook. The guy vomits, falls down. They go back to the stool. Like she's saying, geez, I don't know. Anybody would do that for me. Well, I'm picked a fight with. It's wrong. She gets off the stool in a different pose. And now she says to him, I think I owe you an apology. He says, you don't owe me crap. And I don't know you crap for all the years of slavery. And we're not going to talk about that. You want to do me a favor? Shut up, because the next words are going to be out of your mouth is some of your best friends are white. Then they look at each other, they burst into laughter, and that's how the romance starts.
Nice.
It's a good book, I think.
Of the 16, was that the one you had the most fun writing?
Yeah, it's the one I treasure the most because I cheated. Because really, it's not nonfiction. I would say about 40% of it is true. So yeah, I love the book. In fact, a guy writes me a letter. The heroine's name is Micoletta Washington. He writes me a letter and he says, I didn't think you could write a novel. I love this book. It's an email. I love this book. And my favorite character is Mickey. And I wrote back to the guy, mine too. That's why I married her.
There you go. Very nice. Who else has questions? I don't want to monopolize here. And I know there are people here who like to ask questions. Al?
You want to know where the exit is? Is that
off the turnpike or the parkway?
no? This Zoom.
Hey, Jerry,
Yes, sir.
when I was a kid growing up a few centuries ago, I
lost your sound.
Cut out for a second there, Hal.
okay. Got me
You're
now?
good now. Yep.
Okay. I grew up in Akron being a big Cleveland Indians fan, and one of my favorite players was Larry Doby. And I just wanted to know how your association with him evolved.
Larry was a great. I did a eulogy at his funeral. We were very, very close. I don't know what you'd call it. I had something called Project Pride. We played a college football game every year and funded like 19 programs for kids in the city. And Larry was on my board of directors. And I remember him, we had an SAT program, and I remember him telling these kids, I'm looking at you, and some of you are black, and some of you are Hispanic, a couple of you are white. I don't want to hear any crap about how life has dealt you this horribly. You want to know what horrible is? Let me tell you about my life. And then don't say another word. You show up on class Saturday, or I will hunt you down like a dog. That was Larry. He was just, he was a guy. I got to tell you how I met Larry. It's winter. Snow is on the street. Now, I didn't know him. I mean, hello, how you doing? How many times the Indians played the Yankees? I mean, I really just didn't know him. And my doorbell rings, and but he's living in the same town. I was living in Montclair at that time that I'm living in. So I figured later on, well, I'm his hometown columnist. It might be why he's doing, why he came. I said, well, how come you're here? What do you want? He said, all I want to know is, what do you drink? And I said, if it's wet, I'll drink it. Because in those days, it was a napkin description. And he said, I'm coming here with a bottle of scotch at 7:00 tonight. See you then. I had no idea why he wanted to see me. I had no idea about anything. He comes, he brings the scotch. I get a matching bottle out of my cabinet. We sit in the kitchen. Of course, that's where everybody sits. And when the sun came up, it was 7:00 at night. When the sun came up, both bottles were empty. and he told me everything that had gone wrong in his life. I don't know why he was telling me that. He told me everything. He told me about the way when he reported to the Indians, how nobody would shake his hand. They all turned and faced the wall. The three that shook his hands were Hegan, Mike McCormick, batting coach, and a good friend of mine, one of my heroes, Joe Gordon, who played for the Newark Bears and then for the Yankees for a number of years. They were the only people who would shake his hand when he reported. And then he went in the bathroom. We didn't have a locker because it was at Comiskey Park, and that's understandable. They didn't know he was there. It was the day he reported. And he puts his uniform on and he goes out. He walks up the dugout steps in Comiskey Park, and he hears the familiar sound, which is the sound of a ball hitting a glove, and they're all warming up. Nobody will throw him the ball. Nobody. And then he feels a dig. He says, I'm going home. I don't need this shit. Then he feels a dig in his ribs, and he looks, and it's Gordon. And Gordon says, hey, rookie, do you want to profile in that uniform now, or do you want to go out and warm up? And they became friends for life. He was an amazing guy. I loved him very much. We had a lot of fun down at the
I'll put the picture back up.
Yeah, well, there he is.
Yep.
He just he was one of the 3 or 4 best friends I had till he died.
For those who don't know, didn't see it before, it's Larry Doby presenting Jerry for the Hall of Fame in 2000 when Jerry was inducted. So, Jerry, I know we could do this forever. Anybody else have a question before we let Jerry go?
Hey, Dave, one more from me.
Yes, go Al.
Hey,
Since you're also a Hall of Famer,
well,
you get 2 questions.
am I on? Yeah, we go.
Yep.
Jerry, the first guy that hired me as a newspaper man, and I worked for forever, who's also a Hall of Famer, is Cy Burek.
Oh boy, I love
very
Cy.
close to him. You have any stories about him?
Oh, he was such a great guy. I know this. Cy was a very religious Jew, and when we covered the World Series or whatever, if it was Yom Kippur or Rosh Hashanah, he would say that he would go to a synagogue and pray. He would not go to work. But he was such a dedicated guy. And he could tell, he was a great after dinner speaker. He could tell some stories. He was just he's the kind of, I'll tell you the kind of guy he is. In culture and in caring and in human kindness, he matched Shirley Povich. And they used to hang out together. I couldn't break through that axis because they were so far over my head. I listened to them and my mouth would be open when they were talking.
Anybody else?
Yeah, Dave.
Is anybody out there?
I've got one. Jerry, first, thank you for everything you did with Project Pride and
Thank you.
believing in a young teenage guy like me and getting me started. I owe you a debt that I'll never be able to repay.
I was going to write a letter apologizing for putting you in the newspaper business the way everything's going right now.
Well, I had the good sense to get into the digital business and hop to NBC and onward. But
good.
I was wondering if there was a sporting event, a major sporting event, or a happening that you did not get to witness in person and wish you did. Because you've seen a lot and seen almost everything.
Well, I tell you, a lot of people ask me about the first fight I ever went to. And I have to tell them the truth. I didn't get there till the 3rd round. It was 2 guys named Cain and Abel, and my camel died on the way to the arena. So I came in late. I wish I could have seen the whole fight. I know Cain came away with a mark on his forehead. That I know. It might have been an accidental, but.
No others?
Well, how many guys are out there? I just see 2 other people.
There are 9 on here right now.
Oh. Well, all right, guys. It's been a pleasure talking at you because you got to understand at my age, it used to be people wanting to hear me talk. Now when I come in a room, they flee. I empty rooms now, and you guys have nowhere to run, so here we are.
Jerry, I appreciate the time. I'm sure we could do another 5-6 hours minimum.
Be glad to.
We'll have to do it again
Yeah, we should. I'd be very happy to.
because we didn't even get to the surface. Never mind scratching the surface. So thank you. Enjoy the 96-degree heat in Nevada, and we'll be in touch.
Thanks,
Okay.
Jerry. Great.
Thanks everybody for being
Oh,
here.
it's my pleasure.
Thanks, Jerry.
Have a good
Thank
day.
you so much. That was awesome.
Thanks, Jerry.
Oh,
Yeah.
Ed.
Ed.
Oh, hi.
Wait, we won't leave yet. Say hi.
I'm
Ed,
sorry, I didn't get the sound. The sound wasn't on. I had one quick question.
Go.
Do you have a favorite Yogi Berra story?
I'm trying to think. Most of them didn't happen. So my fondest memory of Yogi is standing over stark naked over the Yankee buffet between the games of a doubleheader, scratching his scrotum. But Yogi was a really good guy. I have a Yogi Berra story.
I knew it would come.
Project Pride used to also be, in addition to the Army Navy football game that we junior varsity that we ran, we also had a Man of the Year dinner, and Yogi was our Man of the Year one year. And I wrote a script for our girls softball team to give. They gave roses to Carmen Berra, and right on cue they said, "Mrs. Berra, we want to thank you so much for letting Yogi stay up late tonight with us." So now, kids and puppies are going to win no matter what you do. So we had a bitty basketball, it was called. They were the world champions. They won it in New Orleans. They were 8, 9 years old, 10. And they came up, and they were disadvantaged kids in some ways. And they gave Yogi a picture of Robinson sliding home. And they had written underneath it, "Personally, we still think he was out," which and then, Yogi got thrown out of the game, which he loved. But then they presented him, the guy who did the Rocky statue, did a statue for us, all our Hall of Fame, all our Man of the Year dinners, did a statue of Richie Ashburn swinging the bat, because everything was in Philadelphia. We gave it to Yogi, and he looked at it, he put it down, and he started to cry. And he looked down and wiped his eyes, and he got back to the microphone, and he said, "These kids here, these kids are me. These kids are me on the hill in St. Louis when we had nothing but the fact that we loved baseball." He later told me he loved to beat a team called Edwards Grocery because they were the team with uniforms. And one other thing about that, there's a picture in the Yogi Berra Museum. I tried to steal it, but they caught me, of Yogi playing the outfield on the hill barefoot. He was very special guy and a good guy. Very helpful with Project Pride. He really loved the kids.
Jerry, thank you. If I open it up to one more, we'll go for another hour. But we'll do it again.
No, you'll go for another hour.
I don't know about that. I don't know. I don't know if I can. I can't talk as long as you, and Lord knows I still
That's
have
a
another
lot of
30
people
years
go.
to catch
That's
up.
exactly the complaint.
Jerry, thanks very much.
My pleasure.
And thanks everyone else. And thank you to Greater Winston-Salem Inc. for supporting this series. Have
All
a
right.
great weekend, everybody.
Thank Winston and Salem both for me.
We'll do. Bye-bye.